The third category of lipids is phospholipids. As the name indicates, these are the lipids which are conjugated with phosphate group. These are complex lipids and are very important components of cell membrane. Cell membrane, which is a cellular component of every eukaryotic and prokaryotic cell like animal cell, plant cell, protozoa, bacteria, etc. etc. These are found abundantly in the cell, and these are very important components of the cell. As an example of that, let us see that what is the number of phospholipids in a small bacterium called Escherichia coli. It almost contains approximately 22 crores of phospholipid molecules in its membrane. So this figure, it signifies the importance of phospholipids in every eukaryotic and prokaryotic cell. The function of cell membrane is totally lies on the content of phospholipids. As one of the vital functions of cell membrane is it controls the permeability of cell. That means it controls the entry of molecules inside and exit of molecules outside of the cell. So cellular permeability is controlled by cell membrane, and it is through phospholipids. Let us see the structure of phospholipids. They are composed of two fatty acids and glycerol. So this two fatty acids and glycerol, this is called as diacyl glycerol, which we have already seen in last lecture. And to this third carbon of this glycerol, there is addition of phosphate group, and this phosphate group may be further bound to any functional group that we'll see in next few slides. This is the general structure of phospholipid. We can see this is glycerol backbone, ester bond which is bound to hydrocarbon chain. This is the hydrocarbon chain of one fatty acid. Second carbon is again bound by this ester bond to second fatty acid, that is hydrocarbon chain, and the third carbon, it is bound through this linkage, phosphodiester linkage, through this phosphate group which is bound to oxygen atoms and a functional group, that is R3. We'll see the structure of this phospholipid in detail. So phospholipid, it consists of, it is synthesized from the combination of diacylglycerol plus phosphoric acid. So this is the structure of diacylglycerol. You can draw this structure in your notebook. CH2OCO, this is the ester linkage, and this is the hydrocarbon chain of first fatty acid. CHCCO, that is the ester linkage, and this is hydrocarbon chain of fatty acid. And this third alcoholic group, that is CH2OH, it is free. So this is the structure of diacylglycerol. Since it has two fatty acids, it is called as di. This then combines with phosphoric acid. This is the formula of phosphoric acid, H2PO4, where here there is presence of a single bond, and that is why this oxygen has got a negative charge. Here there are two bonds, so there is no net charge, but here there will be a charge on this oxygen, that is negative. This makes this phosphoric acid molecule polar or hydrophilic. Here this hydroxyl group and this hydroxyl group, so the reaction happens here. So this hydrogen and this hydroxyl group, they are removed in the form of one water molecule, and then this phosphorus group, it binds to this oxygen atom. Similarly, it has the another end. Here there is one more OH group. So this is a reactive group. It may react with functional head group, so which is responsible for several structural functions. Examples of these functional head groups we'll see later on. So this reactive group may combine with functional head groups as a result of release of one H2O molecule. Now let us see what happens between this and this, considering that a functional group is bound to this end. So this is diacylglycerol, and this diacylglycerol, it binds to this phosphoric acid. Now see, this phosphoric acid is already bound to head group, a reactive head group. Now this end is free and this end is free. So there will be release of one water molecule, and as a result of that there will be formation of this type of linkage here. This is the structure of a phospholipid. So while drawing the structure, you have to draw the fatty acid here, one fatty acid here, one fatty acid here, and this there will be presence of one phosphoric acid group which is bound to this functional group. We can see here that there is a negative charge, and that makes this particular end of glycerol hydrophilic or reactive with water molecules, or this makes this compound polar. This part of the molecule is non-polar because this is hydrocarbon chain. This part is also non-polar, so both these chains are hydrophobic, and this will be hydrophilic. So we can see here that in case of a molecule of phospholipid, there are both the ends, hydrophobic end and hydrophilic end. That means phospholipid is a molecule which contains both the groups, hydrophilic group, that means polar group, as well as hydrophobic group, that means non-polar group, and therefore this molecule is called as amphipathic molecule. Amphipathic molecule means the molecule that contains both the groups, polar as well as non-polar. This is the complete structure of phospholipid. You can see here, this is glycerol backbone, and through ester linkage bound to fatty acid, ester linkage bound to fatty acid, and then phosphodiester linkage through which it is bound to this phosphate group. This is how the phospholipid molecules are synthesized with specific head groups. So what are these head groups? These head groups may be mostly like this. So these are the several examples of these functional groups. It may be phosphatidic acid. So when hydrogen is bound here, so it is called as phosphatidic acid. It may be phosphatidylserine. This is the structure of phosphatidylserine. So from this end, it binds here. So the whole compound becomes phosphatidylserine. Phosphatidylethanolamine. So when this head group is ethanolamine, this is the structure of ethanolamine. So when this ethanolamine group it binds here, the whole structure is called as phosphatidylethanolamine. So that so on and so forth. So if it is choline group, if this group is bound here, then this whole structure will be called as phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidyllinositol, and phosphatidylglycerol when this head group is glycerol. All these are the different examples of all these are different examples of phospholipids. We need to remember the different examples of phospholipids. Now, let us understand this amphipathic nature of phospholipid. This is the general structure of phospholipid, where we can see that there are two chains, hydrocarbon chains contributed by fatty acids. This is one, this is two, and the third group is a phosphate group which is bound to head group. This end is going to be hydrophilic and these two are hydrophobic, non-polar. This is polar. So just for the sake of understanding, I will tilt this slide, this structure slightly. Okay, so this is just the rotation is changed. Again you can see this is glycerol backbone, this is one fatty acid, this is another fatty acid, and now this phosphate group, I will take this phosphate group upside so that there will be clear division, that if I bring this phosphate group, bring this end on the top, so that this hydrophilic end, it will be at the top, and hydrophobic end, it will be at the bottom. So if I do that, it will appear like this. Now here we can clearly see that this is glycerol backbone, these are fatty acids, and this is the phosphate group with head group. This is going to be polar, this is non-polar. So for the sake of understanding, let us draw this structure in more animated form like this. So we can see here, this is the same structure. This is hydrophilic head, this is glycerol backbone, glycerol backbone. Then these are ester bonds and hydrocarbon chain, ester bond and hydrocarbon chain, same here, ester bond, hydrocarbon chain. And this, the third carbon of this glycerol backbone, it is bound to this phosphate group here. So this forms the hydrophilic head, and this is hydrophobic tail, which is formed by saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. We already learned saturated fatty acids are shown like this straight because there are absence of double bonds. Unsaturated fatty acids, if there is a double bond, it gives the flexibility. So it may be saturated, both may be saturated, both may be unsaturated, because this composition of fatty acid in phospholipid is going to be responsible for the fluidity characteristics of cell membrane. So cell membrane is not a solid structure. Always the proteins and molecules are floating, they are swimming in cell membrane, and therefore it has to have a particular consistency or fluidity, and that is balanced by the composition of saturated fatty acids and unsaturated fatty acids. So this is the hydrophilic head and hydrophobic tail. So therefore we call this molecule as an amphipathic molecule. An amphipathic molecule is the molecule that contains polar group as well as non-polar group. This is the complete structure of phospholipid. lipid. Again, this is the structure as we can see in the previous slide. So I will just draw a smaller version of this like this. This is one layer of phospholipid as you can see. This is the another layer of phospholipid, and this is called as a lipid bilayer. This is how the structure of cell membrane looks like. This is polar head and non-polar tail. Non-polar tail and polar head. So all the hydrophobic chains are immersed inside and hydrophilic heads are outside. They're interacting with water molecule. They're interacting with water molecule, and this is the hydrophobic zone. And as it is shown that the composition of these fatty acids, it decides the or it controls the fluidity of this lipid bilayer. This lipid bilayer is never solid, as I have already told you that the molecules like proteins, carbohydrates, different types of substances are passing through this cell membrane. So this phospholipid has to be in a fluid form. This is called as fluid mosaic model because this structure is fluid one because of the composition of unsaturated fatty acids. So it is a floating one like this. So I hope that the structure of this cell membrane or the lipid bilayer is understood. It is a floating one and it is not a solid one. This is the complete structure of cell membrane. This is called as fluid mosaic model. Mosaic means presence of patches. We can see here these are the patches. These appears like patches, the phospholipids, and therefore and it is uh, these fatty acids are unsaturated fatty acids, and therefore this makes the structure flexible or it adds to the fluidity of the membrane. That's why it is called as fluid mosaic model. So this is the lipid bilayer as we can see. Along with that, there are presence of different molecules which are required to carry out cellular functions. These are different types of proteins. So here globular protein, then glycoproteins, carbohydrates, glycolipids are there, cholesterol molecules are there, integral proteins are there which are known for several transport functions, peripheral proteins, channel proteins, as we can see here that there is a channel, that means this allows the passage of selective molecules inside and outside of the membrane and the cell. Then different types of other functional proteins. So this is the structure of cell membrane, which is responsible for carrying out several functions along with the aid of these different molecules like carbohydrates, glycoproteins, cholesterol, and channel proteins.